Hello, story seekers. We are still here, and with us still here in the still hearingness is Karin Robinson. Karen, are you ready to answer some questions?
I'm happy to be interrogated. Bring it on.
That was the first one, and you're doing well. So, for the first actual one, what is the first story you wrote which meant something to you?
So there's two ways of answer that question. I think this first story I can remember writing that made me think fiction is a thing that I can do, not just a thing I can read. I was probably in the sixth grade, and I wrote a short story about a young girl who inherited a magical ring from her grandfather. And the whole story was told in kind of retro in flashback. So she was, she'd inherited the ring and she was just thinking about her grandfather. And I thought, this feels like a thing. This feels like a thing like the things I read. And I was a big
Yeah.
reader. So that made me kind of go, oh, I can make these. I can do this. So that was kind of my thing. And then of course I promptly didn't and went
Mm,
on
classic.
and studied English at university and, wrote lots of other fiction, but didn't ever believe that I could be a writer properly, quote unquote. But then I think when I was probably mid-30s, so, not a little while ago now, I for some reason got this crazy idea in my head that I was going to write a feature-length screenplay. I had this idea about a political drama, about a kind of a political family in which a woman winds up running against her own father-in-law for governor of Virginia, and there were all sorts of shenanigans that happen within it. And for some reason, I had this crazy notion that I was going to turn it into a feature-length screenplay, and I took like a whole bunch of like a day a week off work for a period of a few months, and then wrote this 120-page script. I taught myself screenwriting for some reason. Like, not that I, know anyone who does screenwriting or anything, but I got all these books about screenwriting, wrote this thing to the idea that I had in my head, and at the end of it, I read it back and I was like, that's what I meant to write. And it was this incredible moment of, oh, I have done a thing that is long and is the thing I had in my head when I started it.
Mm.
Which I don't know about you, but quite often when I write things, I come to the end of it and I go, oh, it has merits, but it's not quite what I meant. And it meant a lot to me to be able to do that and to learn that you can do something longer. And I think I probably would never have gone on to try my hand at novels properly if I hadn't learned that I could do it through the medium of screenwriting. Because I was very terrified of the idea of writing a novel. It just seemed so much to do.
I mean, it is. It is too much, really, to ask of anybody. What a cool pathway. I love this idea of this magic ring from that she inherits. This first story. So if this was the sixth grade, so does that mean that you would be 11 or 10?
It would have been about 12, so about
Oh,
my daughter's current age.
right, right. Do you remember any of the influences that went into it? Like, did it come from somewhere? Did you like see a mundane ring get inherited and thought, what if that's magic?
That is such a good question. I must have had something in mind. I think, because I was reading a lot of kind of what we would now call YA, although I don't think we even called it that back then. I was reading a lot of YA fantasy at the time, of various different types. Um, so, it probably was very influenced by that. But I think that's part of what I liked about the story is it didn't feel like it was somebody else's story. It felt like it was mine.
Mm.
Um, and then I borrowed some kind of ideas and tropes from other writers that I liked. And I borrowed a bit of a voice from a couple of writers I particularly like, Robin McKinley, who I'll talk about later when you ask one of your future questions, who's really good about writing the interiority of, especially her female characters in the midst of a fantasy universe. And I think that's probably where I got the voice of the little girl.
Mm.
But yeah, it's so funny. I haven't thought about that story too much for ages, but it was very meaningful to me.
Mm.
Have you ever pulled out an iPhone and tried to shoot your screenplay? That's my question.
I haven't actually. It honestly hadn't occurred to me to do so, but now that you've said it, I need to go back and look at that screenplay because it was, I talked earlier about in the last episode about how I always write about things that I'm worried about, right? So that screenplay was about how politics divides us, actually, which still feels very relevant. So that's why it was the kind of breakdown of a family in the midst of a political crisis. But I'd have to update it if I wanted to do anything with it now, because it was very much of its time, and it was one of the key plot points was about the fact that gay marriage was not at that time legal, and that was a big dividing line between the woman and the father-in-law character. There were different sides of that issue, so I would probably have to update it if I wanted to do it now, or make it a period piece, because it's or who knows, maybe wait a few months and it will be relevant again because the Supreme Court might strike down same-sex marriage. So hey, what's old is new.
Are you interested at all in talking about like what led to you becoming what sounds like a fairly integral part of this Democrats Abroad movement group?
So I think, yeah, the easiest way to explain that is, how do I explain that? So I've been living here in London for a really long time. When I went to, I did my university degree in the US, where I grew up, in Washington, D.C. And I was very excited as a teenager to have the chance to go and move to D.C., which I was always fascinated by as a city. And I had thought that I wanted to do politics at that point. But then as soon as I got to DC, one thing you discover if you live in DC is that everybody thinks they're going to be the next president of the United States. Everybody thinks they're going to be a senator, or everybody works in politics. And I was only a few months into living there when I was like, this is really boring. I want to go do books and I want to go do art. And I made these like quirky friends from kind of more of a cultural scene. So I did nothing with politics for years until I moved to London. And around that time was when George W. Bush got elected. And you may remember that the election of 2000 was very contentious.
It was it was hotly contested, wasn't it? There should have been another recount. Is my vague memory of this like Gore gave in slightly too early? Is that correct?
Yeah, I think Gore almost only won that election, but oh well, here we are.
Yeah, yeah.
And George W. Bush did not govern like somebody who had a narrow majority or no majority at all, which he didn't have. He like Trump in his first election, didn't win the popular vote and probably didn't win the electoral college vote anyway. But never mind, we all decided somehow we were going to get on with that. And that just really radicalized me. And I thought, well, I'm thousands of miles away from home. I need to do something useful about this.
Yeah.
And that kind of was my life from that moment until just a few years ago. It was me waking up every morning and going, well, this is bullshit. I got to do something about this. And it took me a really long time to, because it wasn't very good for my mental health, and it didn't leave me any space for creative endeavors at all. Certainly didn't leave a lot of space for writing. But there was this feeling of responsibility that somehow it was my job to fix it. And turns out I didn't do a very good job if it was my job. So hopefully other people will figure out a way forward, because I seem to have absolutely failed in my entire life's endeavor.
No, that's too much to put on anyone's shoulders. I think that's Atlas-like.
There's never been a greater sort of crevasse between the two sides, have there? The American political spectrum.
I don't know about never, but like at least from my perspective, I think. But this is pretty bad. Like it's.
So let's say the very precise way of saying it is American politics has not been this violently divided since just before the Civil War.
Yeah.
And I had
that was gonna be my point. I was like, they've literally fought a war before. Like it's.
Yeah, but we may get there. Literally, I had a guest on my politics podcast a few years ago. It's really brilliant, pollster and analyst, and she came on and I asked her the question, do countries ever come back from being in this place? Do countries ever depolarize themselves? And she couldn't think of an example, short of winding up in violent conflict with each other. So so that's fun.
Oh dear.
Me, the English would never have an internal battle, so I cannot say anything.
It happens every couple of 100 years, doesn't it? Wars of the Roses.
No,
Civil
all of
War.
our kings are anointed by God and take their rightful place.
That must be very comforting.
One of the right places was on a scaffold, I seem to recall from my.
Yeah, that's the one.
Yeah, okay.
That's where God wanted him.
Yeah. Oh, that was a great
I need
answer.
you up here.
I do actually just have one follow-up question to it, which is that
Oh.
so you realised that it was bad for your mental health. You realised that you hadn't necessarily pursued your creative endeavours as much as you might have done. But was it like an epiphanous moment? Like, did you just wake up one morning and be like, "I'm done"?
No, it wasn't anything like that because, and I'm still involved with the party, but much less so. It was more that I just was wrung out. I had given everything I had to give, and there was nowhere else to go. And then lockdown happened. Remember that whole delight? And that kind of broke my brain a little bit. And when I came out of the lockdown, I was like, I just need to go into the world doing things that I'm really excited to do and talking to people about things I'm really excited to talk to them about. And that's when I went back to this book The Fairy Politic I had started. I'd written a few thousand words of it because it was an idea I'd had for a very long time. And I went back to that and I was like, I still like this. I still like this idea. I think it's more relevant than ever. I still think it's really fun. I want to make this happen. So what I wound up doing was signing up for a Faber Academy course.
Yeah.
They have a 6-month how to write a novel course because I reasoned that one of the reasons I was so compelled by politics and so pulled through with it was there was a community behind it. I really loved and love still that there are fellow Americans who share my sense of commitment and desire to build a better country and a better world and so on and so forth. So I thought I'm not just going to sit in a room and talk to and not talk to anyone. I want to go out and meet people and talk to them about writing. And so my Faber Academy course was fantastic for that, and I'm still really good friends with several of the people on that course. In fact, we just a few weeks ago we went away on a writing retreat together for the weekend, and it was just really nice to talk to people who know you as a writer first and foremost, and who care about your book in a meaningful way. So yeah, that's how I got to where I am now.
Gosh, great answers.
Now, Karin, say hypothetically that two writer podcasters were being held hostage by a powerful and capricious bibliomancer, and this unnamed bibliomancer draws his energy from people's love of books, and so he was sending these two out to find more books for his library. What novel would you say is closest to your heart, hypothetically?
First thing I would tell this bibliomancer is that kidnapping and extortion is no way to extract book recommendations, and I would have been very happy to tell him what books he should add to his library, even without
too loud. You can hear.
So he really should think about himself a bit more. There are actually I'm going to give you 3 books because there are 3 different types of books I want to give you, which is I want to give you one modern classic, I want to give you a personal classic, and then I want to give you an all-time classic. So the modern classic that I would encourage your bibliomancer to urgently read if he hasn't already is Susanna Clarke's Jonathan Strange and Mr. Norrell. Which I don't know if it's come up on the podcast before, but it's a masterpiece.
I think I might have waxed lyrical about this a couple of times. I love that book. I think it's fantastic. Great choice.
It's basically perfect. It has an entire world within it. It does everything right and understands kind of character and curmudgeonly difficult characters, and it makes you love them even though they're awful. So I love that. It has a wonderful take on the Fae, which I'm, deeply influenced by. Absolutely love that. And it just builds the period detail of it, the scale of the world it's built. So it's a masterpiece. Jane Austen could never. So love that. Then a personal classic that I want to commend to you. I mentioned, I think in the last episode, the writer Robin McKinley. I don't know if you've come across her, but she writes beautiful books, a lot of kind of fairy tale retellings, etc. But I read when I was probably, again, about 12 years old, which is why it might have been an influence on that story that we were just talking about, her book, The Hero in the Crown. which is a beautiful alternative universe fantasy novel that stars a female heroine called Erin, who is probably one of my favorite characters of all time, because she's a sort of awkward, overlooked princess who's just really bloody stubborn and figures out how to kill dragons just from sheer stubbornness and determination, even though killing dragons is not considered a very glamorous or interesting thing to do in her kingdom, and then winds up being super, super important. So I think it's a lovely book, and I, reread it frequently because it's such a personal touchstone for me. And then the third book I want to commend to you is a book that I think is an underappreciated originator of many strands of the fantasy genre as we know it today. And I'm not talking about Tolkien. I'm talking about The Midsummer Night's Dream by Shakespeare.
Oh,
ooh,
great!
Yeah. Gosh, have you ever been in that one, Nick? Have you done that one before?
No, I've always wanted to play bottom though.
I've always said that you've got a great. I mean, you'd be great as bottom.
You called me a natural bottom many times.
only in the throes of passion. Oh,
Well,
amazing.
So I absolutely love the work that Shakespeare did with that book. And by the way, I played Titania when I was about 14. So had you been bottom, then I would have been, seducing you whilst you had an ass head. So that would have been a whole scene.
Yeah,
But I absolutely love the boldness that Shakespeare had of just going, I'm just going to randomly pick some creatures out of mythology and make them do my stupid plot, which doesn't make any sense, and then make the points that I want to make. There's a sort of lovely irreverence about it to just say, I'm going to grab, Hippolyta and Theseus out of Greek mythology and grab Oberon and the fairies out of more British tradition, mash them up, do whatever the heck I want with them. And I think that's the best of modern fantasy is doing the same thing. It's just going, I'm gonna take the things that interest me and like recut their cloak and do them how I want them, which is lovely.
I think it's well observed. What a great point. It's I don't think I'd ever really put that together. That probably means I'm fairly thick, I think. But it's
no, Shakespeare was writing crossover episodes. That's what we know now.
It was fan service. That's all it was. No, and in my book, The Fairy Politic, the fairy queen in that book is Titania, because I based it on her because I do love her character so much. She's so, she's just not quite right in the head, but I adore her. She's just wields power in such an interesting way that's unlike what you usually see in literature. So I was really interested in that kind of model of how a woman holds power in a magical kingdom.
Those are three really interesting choices. I love this idea of little Karin reading. It was called the Hero in the Crown, wasn't it? The second choice. And just being so inspired, and then for you to now be on this podcast talking so eloquently about the roots of modern fantasy in Elizabethan dramatists. It's really cool. It's really cool. It warms my heart. Yeah. Warms my heart. So when you have written something, when you've got your short stories or your novel, which is on sub, what is your editing process? So once you've done with the first bit of writing, how do you go back and polish it up?
Oh, that's a really good question, because that's where I am at the moment with my next book, is I've just finished a first draft. So I wish that I were more patient than I am, because I feel like the sensible thing to do would be to then take a nice little break of a few weeks and then read the thing properly and understand what's working and what's not working. In fact, what I actually tend to do is then immediately give myself a few days off, which I've just had. And then this weekend, I'm going to dive straight back into it and just fix the things I know that need fixing, because I find drafting really fun, but I also try to force myself to not go back and rewrite too much while I'm in the process of first drafting. I like to have a nice clean first draft. I like it to be kind of something I feel proud of, but if I get a better idea or if I realize I need to change a character or a storyline, I try not to let myself go back and do it. So the first thing I'm going to do this week, starting this weekend, is go back and just move some things around, move some of my chess pieces around the board a little bit, do some of the things I need to do. I'm going to add in, there are some little interstitial pieces I want to add, which are in the voice of the AI personalities I've got two contrasting AI personalities in the book. One, the book is called The Worst Version of Helena Dugan because it's about a woman who works as a customer service supervisor effectively for a chain of restaurants, and her customer service personality becomes the basis of an AI bot, right? It's like this lovely version of, she's really mumsy and she's very on brand, but then she has a secret social media account where she's been dumping her worst thoughts for decades. And the worst thoughts version of her also becomes an AI personality. And I just don't feel like I've given enough voice to these personalities in the book yet. So I want to almost put little chapter headings in with where each of them get the chance to kind of have their say and almost comment on the text as we go. So I'm going to do that, change a few other characters and move it around. And then I will sit down and properly give it a read and think it through and do my structural edit. But yeah, then there's a structural edit, which in my last book, I did 2 complete structural edits and then a rework to the ending. I don't know. What do you find the hardest part of writing? Because for me, with long fiction, the hardest part for me is always getting the endings just right because I care about them so much, and I'm so tired by the time I get to them. So I know I'm going to rewrite my ending a couple times again.
For myself, I actually really love editing a short story. I think it's where it comes alive. I've gotten quite disciplined with myself in terms of actually just allowing the first thing to come out and then playing with it. And it's such a powerful moment when you do that for the first time, and then if you can replicate it the second time, the third time, the fourth time. It's how writing works. It's how it definitely works for me. It's how it works for most people. So, and if you can learn to enjoy the editing process, it feels like such a powerful tool. But however, in a longer piece, so I finished work on a book in December last year, and that was almost nightmarish. Applying the level of editing tweaks that I normally do to short stories to a novel created so many fucking problems with everything shifting and changing. It became this just not mess, but just I couldn't grip it. I couldn't get a grip on it. It would slip through my grasp over and over again. Eventually, I did finish, but it was absolutely fucking horrible. So I learned a lot about what not to do in that. But I think I'm not quite there with it loving the edit on a longer piece yet. Oddly, the ending didn't change too much. Just didn't reply to your
question. And then they all
died
at the end. Yeah.
Yeah, it's pretty much it. Yeah.
I think a lot of people come into long fiction writing knowing what their ending is and being really excited to get there. But what I've realized, and to the point that I was making earlier, what I've realized about myself is because I'm writing about the things that worry me, and really believe in my story, and I really love beginnings, and I actually really love middle bits because that's where I get to come out to play and let things happen to them. I struggle with endings because I don't know the answers to the things I'm worried about. I don't know how to the satisfying resolution completely. And I know that sounds like that should be part of the point of it, but because I care about getting them right so much, and I want them to be truly satisfying and feel believable and truthful and all these things, I struggle a little bit with getting them exactly how I want them.
For myself, definitely in writing longer fiction, it's going back in the edit and working out how to separate self from work, very specifically in the things I know about the characters that I haven't put down on the page, and recognizing where I know them because I know them and not because I've read it back. I think that's a thing I really struggle with. So it's going to be interesting learning to get over that, I think. Because in a short story, you can let a lot of things be up to interpretation, but when you're telling a bigger story, you kind of need to explain what people look like a little bit or who they are.
Yeah, and sometimes it's enough for you to know. You don't necessarily need to even tell the reader, but if you know, then you know what decisions that person would make, or you understand, kind of you feel them, and it comes through in the pages. So yeah, sometimes it's putting all the stuff on the page and then you take it out again, but because it was there, it leaves a residue of truth that just works.
Oh, and Karen, just quickly, what was the tag where you post your secret evil thoughts? I thought I was gonna get a ban. I thought I was there.
Trip her up.
So,
It
yeah.
would be like Dracula Alucard, right? It's whatever Karin Robinson is backwards. That's the.
Don't say it out loud. We'll summon her.
I mean, go
Nosny
for it.
Ball.
And if you think you found it, then you found it. I'll claim whatever you think.
I think your name is actually really cool
Donald
backwards.
Trump.
Hang on, it's actually really cool backwards, isn't it? Because it's
Nirak.
Nosnibor Nirak,
Yeah.
which does sound like an evil villain. Nice work.
3 times in a mirror.
Yep.
So,
Yeah, well,
oh, please go on.
I was just going to say the character in the book, the AI bot that's based on that, I've called her Nova. Both because I want her to kind of have this feeling of newness, but also because I had this idea that my character Helena, she picks that name because she thinks of this part of herself as like an explosion, like that's blowing up in space and that's purely destructive, and she feels really badly about it. But then when I was researching it, I discovered that actually that's a kind of inaccurate view of what an astronomical nova is, because actually it is quite often two suns that have come into orbit from each other and they suddenly become brighter because they're in orbit, and actually they're quite stable. And I was like, that is such a beautifully perfect version of my story, because it's meant to be about her reconciling these two sides of herself. And I'm like, well, I couldn't have made that up, so I'm using that.
Listen, we talk about this on the podcast all the time. Say it with us, Karen. I meant to do that the whole time.
It was totally intentional. Yes, I am a genius.
We knew it. We knew you are. So, speaking of genius, who inspired you to start telling your own stories?
That's a really good question. Who inspired me to start telling my own story? I feel a little bit like we're entering in the space of He Who Shall Not Be Named, because my favorite writer is one that I'm not feeling great about at the moment.
Is it initials NG?
It is indeed, yes.
Yeah, okay, right.
This is it's quite devastating for me because I am not necessarily a completionist when it comes to authors. I'm sort of scatty and sporadic, and I will dip in and out of an author's over, even authors that I truly love. Like I probably have most of Terry Pratchett, but I haven't read literally everything Terry Pratchett ever read. I do think I have read literally everything Neil Gaiman ever wrote, including his Duran Duran biography. Right?
Nice.
So,
deep cut.
Yeah, it was a deep cut. I've read some of his like early non-fiction, he wrote some wonderful articles for Time Out about wandering around London and being really bored because there was nothing to do. So yeah, I have followed his career very closely, and also his advice to writers has been really helpful, and he's turned me on to lots of other writers that I really like, including, I think he's where I first heard about Susanna Clarke and got turned on to Jonathan Strange. So I'm feeling very raw about it right now.
Well, I don't think it's that. Go on, Nico. Were you about to push that?
No, I was just going to say I don't think it's necessarily a bad thing to have been inspired by someone who isn't great. You were inspired to positive political activism by a gibbering cowboy idiot who said hilarious things all the time. So
that somebody threw a shoe at. I mean, let's really dig into that one like that.
Ad objection.
Good lord.
He denies the allegations and he denies the alligators. That's the. I've got so many Bushisms locked in my head from that era.
They used to sell posters of all of the Bushisms.
Yeah.
He used to have those 365-day calendars where you could tear off a Bush misspeak every day of the year, and I just thought, well, why would you?
Why would you? Yeah, why would you want that in your brain?
He, I often think of this one weirdly because of my my gramps who was a fishmonger, but he once said, "I dream of a future where man and fish can coincide peacefully," which is
Coincide
so
peacefully.
insane.
Yeah, it actually sounds like the start of a response to a prompt, doesn't it? Like the. Yeah, no, but I get the
Might have appreciated that. The fishmonger with the koi pond might have appreciated that.
for sure. I get being raw and a bit cut up by it. But I think, as Nico says, like you can, as long as something positive has come out of it for you, then I think it doesn't matter where that inspiration came from.
It's just such an interesting thing, isn't it? The anger that I feel about it, because I feel it isn't just that I liked his work, it's that I liked his presence in the world and the way he treated fans, and at least I thought I did. And he was always very encouraging of other writers, and I resent that because it feels like, well, now I've lost that, not just that sense of community that I previously felt in company with his kind of wider kind of extended universe. Makes me sad that it's no longer quite accessible to me in the same way.
I know we've spoken a lot about in the previous episode about like parents and grandparents and all the rest of it, but whenever it is that kind of moment, isn't it, where when you see for the first time that there's flaws in the really really serious flaws in the caregivers around you, and it kind of cracks your foundations a little bit because you're like, wait, aren't they in charge?
Yeah,
exactly.
Yeah, it's got a similar sort of vibe to it. Well,
find Granddad's red armband in a suitcase in the attic. Yeah.
I think we need to be careful comparing these two things, but yeah, similar sort of vibe.
I'm in a silly goose mood. Anyone listening, lawyers listening, I'm just a silly goose.
We're going to keep it nice and light now by asking Karin, for you, what role does religion have in fantasy storytelling?
Oh, just that little question.
Well, it's actually better to get one. If you put an even bigger question next to it, it's like sending snakes in after the rats and all the rest of it. You just keep feeding bigger questions into the mill.
Well, I mean, I'll answer that if you tell me what the meaning of life is, and then we're good.
42.
Yeah, there you go.
42. No, that's just the answer. You've still got to figure out the question. What role does religion play in fantasy storytelling? I mean, it depends on what role you want it to play, I guess would be my answer. For my work, religion is not at the heart of the story, but I think belief is very close to the heart of the stories that I tell. Because religion for me is just one articulation of the beliefs that we hold true and that guide our life. And as I think I've alluded to, there are beliefs that, I was exploring in the Fairy Politic that are about a sense of faith that literally a sense of faith in American democracy, and the mythology that I grew up with, that America was a country, land of the free, home of the brave, that was a nation where that was striving to be the best version of itself, and institutions were kind of venerated, and having gone to university in Washington D.C. So for me, I think I'm thinking a lot about belief, also to the conversation we were just having about initials NJ. I think I'm really interested in this question of how belief sustains us and how it fails us, and what that means and what we do when it does. But I think for me, it isn't about kind of religion itself necessarily so much as the force that drives us to believe, because I think as a species we are natural believers, right? We're spotting the patterns in the bushes, and we very quickly add them up to the face of the tiger. And similarly, we spot a pattern in our lives or in our world around us, and we very quickly add them up to whether it's a higher power, or whether it's an institution that's worthy of our trust, or whether it's even just kind of basic faith in human nature. I think it's really interesting to explore that.
Is there potentially something to the idea that the ancestors that never were the ones that didn't have this? Like it's the belief that sort of created early communities that made humanity actually start to thrive, potentially. Like, I'm not basing this in any sort of science or research. It's just like, you are right, it's at the core of us, but maybe it's not. Maybe that's just because we're the descendants, we're the bits of pottery.
Yeah, I mean, it seems to have been an evolutionary advantage to us, right? So, so well done, ancient ancestors, for bringing about the chain of events that now lead to us believing in bizarre conspiracy theories. You have to take the bad with the good, right?
I mean, jumping off of that, for yourself personally,
Oh, go on.
The day for the answer comes. Would you rather it was gods or ancient aliens?
Would I rather it was God or ancient aliens? Well, you can't say God because you have to say which God, right? Would I rather it was ancient aliens or...
It's the cool Egyptian ones with the animal heads.
Yeah, like, I'm not sure I want a, dog-headed God, but that they're probably quite alien. So I'm gonna go with God in the hope that there's some truth to the theory that if there did turn out to be a God, that it was that we were somehow made in his or her image, and maybe he'd have more empathy for us than the aliens, who might just find us very odd. But I'd certainly rather meet an ancient alien. I think that'd be fascinating.
I imagine God coming back would be like someone getting home from a holiday and realising they left the stove on the entire time. Oh, this was really nearly a horrible disaster.
Monkeys did what?
I would have some very sharp questions for them if they did come down here.
Yeah.
What do you call this, then?
Just by definition, wouldn't, like, if there was a god, wouldn't they technically be an alien? But they would be an extraterrestrial. Because they would. Is there something to that? Am I just being really silly?
Yeah, non-terrestrial, I suppose.
Non-terrestrial, yeah.
So we situate heaven.
I mean, extracorporeal. Surely it's like the next thing.
Extra-dimensional. That's what he is.
I felt very extracorporeal after the pandemic with how much I ate. I think that was.
Oh, me too, buddy.
Oh, good answer. Good answer.
So,
yeah, go ahead, Nico.
Do you feel particularly connected to any culture? And if you do, how has that shaped your writing?
Yeah, so we talked earlier about the kind of the Democrats Abroad community more widely that I was a part of for such a long time. I think there's like I love Democrats Abroad. We are an odd bunch, honestly. We take ourselves very seriously, very bright, very interesting people who mostly don't live in their country for a good reason, right? Quite often wouldn't quite fit in back home in quite the same way. So I love the weird and wonderful crew of people that make up the obsessive group of Democrats Abroad. So yeah, I would say I align with that culture to a reasonable extent, and just more broadly to, I think if you were extrapolating, I also have more broadly a strong sense of shared empathy for all immigrants everywhere. Which obviously doesn't make this a great political moment for me to live in from that perspective either. But I think immigration is such an eye-opening experience when you find yourself kind of away from where you have come from and seeing it anew afresh with new eyes, and also the casual ways in which almost every society I'm aware of is intentionally or unintentionally unwelcoming to immigrants, even immigrants that they would quote unquote call the right kind. I find really fascinating, and I've had lots of conversations with people here in this country who will be very happy to witter on to me about these bloody immigrants coming here and doing whatever, until I finally say to them, well, but you realize I am an immigrant, and they're, well, yeah, but I don't mean you.
Oh, correct, yeah.
Well, yeah.
Yeah.
Tell me how you mean then, because I'm, like,
yeah.
What's different? So yeah, I do have that sense of empathy, even though I think they would not necessarily, many immigrants would not necessarily recognize me as part of their community, but I recognize myself as part of that community.
you in your writing, do you deal at all with rather than the people that they've immigrated to be with? So like they sort of the places that they've gone. Do you ever deal with what it's like for the people that they left behind? So what the impression of the people who have left the country is for the people that are still there. Because I'm just sort of thinking about this Democrats abroad thing, and like, do you encounter any resistance from other Americans about living, about having left?
Yeah, I think we used to have to be quite careful when we were doing, so I don't know if you can hear, I have an accent that comes and goes. So I can dial it up and be more American if I need to, or I can dial it back down again and be quite British. That works. And when we do phone banking back to the States, we sometimes had to be quite careful about kind of who we put on which phone banks, because if you dial in to speak to voters, even if you are definitely a US citizen with a slight accent, you can get some negative responses. Or you'll get people saying things like, well, I don't know why you care, you don't even live here. And I'm like, well, I do, I am a citizen. I pay. Americans are required to pay to file taxes for even uh, based on their citizenship, not based on their residence. So on the tax files, um, but also I feel very strongly that we do so much as a country that affects the rest of the world, and the rest of the world doesn't get a look in. So I kind of always think of Democrats abroad as one of the ways that we try and redress that balance a little bit, and kind of like let the voice of the world who are affected by American policy at least, have some influence on the views and opinions of those voters who live here or outside of the country. But yeah, people can be snotty about it, but so what? They're wrong.
I'm just wondering. Sorry, go on, Nico. All right, okay. I was just gonna the sort of second part of that was, does that part of things go into your writing at all? Does it do you sort of try and show that friction, or is it sort of a bit irrelevant to the point that you're trying to make?
It's interesting. I don't think I've consciously done that yet, but I have another idea for a book that I might write someday, which is about the left behinds. So I have this other idea for a book that is about a future sci-fi epic in which kind of humanity basically abandons Earth except for a very small cadre that stays behind because they just can't be doing with space flight. They're just not into it at all. And there's some themes in that kind of I would like to explore that are about kind of who leaves and who stays, and the ways that insular communities become more insular when the people who are outward looking leave. Yeah, potentially in that, but it's not something I've explicitly explored.
The reason I ask is just because I had this just sudden flash that it might have been relevant for the dynamic between Hilda and Ermengarde in your story from the last episode. Because this idea that she's been, obviously she hasn't chosen to leave, so it's a completely different scenario because she was enslaved. But there was like a hatred, wasn't there, from Hilda? There was you brought this on as sort of thing. It's just I was seeing a pattern. I wasn't sure whether it was connected or not, and but that's really interesting.
No, it's a really interesting connection. Yeah, and I do see it, and you're absolutely right. I think there's especially a sense of with Hilda that what she sees when she sees Ermengarde is a woman who's fully gone native, quote unquote. Who's fully human as far as she can see. But what she's not seeing is that in Hilda's in Ermengarde's heart, she has never been more Germanic tribes than she is right at that moment, because just about to fulfill kind of her own understanding of what her country needs. So yeah, there is definitely a strain of that. Well spotted.
Well, I think it's because you pour so much of yourself in your writing that I think it's it's easy to be outside the box and sort of and point at bits of what's happening inside the box, isn't it? But it must be a really fascinating identity to grapple with, and then to create stuff as well alongside it. Really interesting. Yeah, no, I'm just like, thanks for talking to us so openly about your politics and stuff, because I'm aware that it's actually not a. My understanding is that it's kind of not a done thing in American culture to discuss politics so intensively. So, Yeah, thank
Well,
you.
I think it's something that's another thing that I'm really sad about at the moment because, democracy only works if we can have honest and robust conversations about it. But, right now, a lot of the even activist community that I know are quite fearful, for very good reason, because the current administration is quite retributionary and is perfectly happy to use the powers of their office inappropriately, even to things like digging into people's tax records or, causing, they've detained American citizens for immigration charges, even though they're American citizens. So even the activists that I know are quite nervous right now, quite rightly. And it is really terrifying to watch how quickly that is happening. But I just have to hope and believe that, as much as fear is contagious, courage can also be contagious, and that it only takes, hopefully, a small fraction of people to decide to be defiant in the face of that, to kind of pour encourager les autres, right? So that others can see. Not that I'm putting myself in that category by any means. There are others far braver than I, but I'm
very,
trying.
very strong words. Like, normally we'd tell a joke or something and try and sort of like soften it onto the next thing, but really that's where we're at, isn't it? That is the case all round, and it's very much time for people to actually start having serious conversations and try and do things sensibly and make the world a better place.
Sorry,
No.
Books are fun.
No. It's as I say, it's a necessary thing to say, I think. Nico.
Yeah.
I think we should wrap because it's 9. Do you want to?
I shall do it.
Execute.
I must say, Karin, you have been marvellous company. As deep and dark into the forest of politics as we got, it has been wonderful to have you here with us.
Couldn't agree more.
It's been such a pleasure.
We've heard a little bit about what you're writing next. We're looking forward to your sub going through, but for now, so people can know where your things are and know your deepest, darkest, most evil thoughts, where can people find you online?
You can find my secret evil thoughts on Blue Sky at Karin JR at Blue Sky, or you can find my Substack at Fantasy and Politics.
Wonderful. Well, thank you for your time, Karin. Thank you for your stories, and thank you for your outlook. It's been absolutely wonderful talking with you. And you've spoken so broadly and eloquently over so many subjects. I'm very impressed, and also this is one of the reasons why I love doing this, because I just love connecting with people's minds. And you've got a good one.
Well, thank you so much. It's been a real treat for me. As I say, I'm such a fan of the podcast. So for me, this is like going on late night TV and getting to riff with some Jay Letterman with Dave Letterman, whatever.
I was going to say, so now it's been ruined for you. You'll never be able to listen again. Now you've met us.
Thanks for joining us for this episode of The Tiny Bookcase.
Remember to subscribe, otherwise you're going to miss out on the future fun.
Also, tell a friend. If you like this episode, link them to it.
We'd be tremendously grateful. You can follow us on Twitter at BookcaseTiny, Facebook at The Tiny Bookcase, and Instagram at BookcaseTiny for updates. Speaking of supporting the podcast, well, magic can only take one so far. The Tiny Bookcase is supported by the generosity of its patrons. Those kind souls have really kept my belly full the last year. Let's cast a spell for them, shall we? For rich ginger tones on their scalp, let us cast the Orangi Hedondo spell for Scott Byrne. And for general fabulousness, why not the Ooh La La How's Your Mother spell on Matthew McLaren?
How do you come up with that shit, man?